the if-else control structure and the conditional operator. Let's take a look at this. Make a working copy of working.c, paste it here into our working project. Double-click on it to open it up. And we'll just replace that printf with a control structure. We'll start with if and a couple of variables for true and false. Int a equals 1 and int b equals 0. In C++, you have a bool type for booleans, and you have true and false. In plain old C, you've got integers and ones and zeros. Of course, you can use any of the scalar integer types. You can use character, you can use int, you can use long. Int is really common. It's usually a convenient word size. You usually don't actually save any space or any speed by using a char. You can use a char here and it'll work just as well. I'm going to use ints for now. And so 1 is true and 0 is false. And we're going to say if a, we'll use a puts here because we're not going to be doing any substitution. This is true. So if I save this and run it, we'll get this is true. And if I change that a to a b, save that and run it, and we'll get nothing because it's not true. So let's put in an else clause. We can say else puts this is not true. And save that and run it. And now for B, it's not true. And if we put the A back in there and save that and run it, we get this is true. So that's pretty straightforward. And of course, the common way to see this, and I personally will rarely just put a statement on the same line as a conditional like that. That's an invitation to bugs. I mean, it works and it's correct. And if you never change it, it's fine. But the minute you start messing with it, you tend to make mistakes. So I'll always just put it in the curly braces like that and do the same thing here. And I will usually also put the else on the same line as the closing curly brace of the if. That's called a cuddled else. And a lot of people hate that. I like it. I find it really easy to read, and I find that it's economical on space. And so this has exactly the same result here. We'll run that, and it says this is true. And if we change it to a B and save it and run it, we get this is not true. You notice we get the little warning here for the variable we're not using as an unused variable. And that's fine. We're expecting that. Now, what if you want to test for if that's not true? Let's see if the other one is true. A lot of languages have an else if where you can do something like that. Let's change this one to A and then test for B in the else if. Unfortunately, C does not have an else if, so you have to actually do this here and say else if as two words, and it works exactly the same. So if I run this, I say this is true, and if I make this one a 0 and this one a 1, then I get the else if B, and I can actually put there the other is true and run that. And then if you want to, you can have a final else and say nothing is true. And then if I make both of these zeros, then I get the nothing is true. This is a really, really common, sometimes you'll get chains of else ifs and an else at the end. It's a pretty common way to do things. C also has another way of doing conditionals, and this is called the ternary conditional operator, just because it's so much fun to say. And it works like this. So if A is true, we'll get a 7 in C. And if A is not true, then we'll get a 9. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll say printf, C is %D, and save it and run it. It says C is 9. So what it does here is it tests the condition. And if the condition is true, it gives you the first value. And if the condition is not true, it gives you the second value. So in this case, it's not true because both of these are zeros at this point. So we get a 9. And if I change the A to a 1 and save that and run it, then we get a 7 because that condition is true. And so you can do things like you can say if A is equal to a 5, I'll save that and run it. Then I get 9 because it's not equal to 5. And if I make it a 5, then I save it and run it. And then we get the 7 because it's now true. So it's called the ternary conditional operator because there's a condition, which is this part here, and it's really always a good idea to put this in parentheses because otherwise you need to memorize the operator precedence chart, and nobody enjoys doing that. And if you have anything more than a single value in these value places, then you want to put those in parentheses as well. And we can just stick parentheses around that for that purpose for now. So we'll save this and we'll run it, and we see we get the 7 because it is equal to 5. And if we make it 42, then it's no longer equal to 5, and now we'll get the 9 value. So it's called the ternary conditional operator because it's ternary, because it has 3 operands. It has the condition and the true and the false operands. And it's called conditional because it operates on a condition. So ternary conditional operator, you'll hear it referred to a lot because people are proud of themselves for being able to remember it and say it, I guess. Conditionals in C are simple and effective. There's one more type of conditional, a multi-way switch, that is covered in the next lesson. So let's go ahead and delete the working file and run clean to get set up for the next lesson.